The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council building stretched high above the assembled representatives from 1,000 worlds. The air hummed with tension as species after species reported the same devastating news. The war was lost. Admiral D. Kextar stood at the center podium, his 6 arms trembling as he read the numbers that would seal their fate. Esteemed council members, his voice cracked through the translation devices. The Void Swarm has consumed another 12 star systems this month alone. Our combined fleets have been reduced to scattered remnants of the great galactic civilization that once spanned 50,000 worlds. We now control barely 6,000 planets. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegates' tentacles writhed in distress. The crystalline Luxari representatives dimmed their natural glow to almost nothing. Even the proud warrior clans of the Corvan Empire sat in stunned silence. 3 centuries, Kextar continued, his mandibles clicking rapidly in a display of extreme nervousness. 300 years of fighting these creatures, and we're no closer to victory than when they first emerged from the void. Between galaxies, they consume everything in their path. Our weapons barely scratch their bioships. Our shields fail within minutes of contact. The ancient sage of the Eternal Archive raised one withered hand. What options remain to us, Admiral? Surely our greatest minds have not exhausted every possibility. Kextar's expression shifted, and for the first time in the session, something resembling hope flickered in his compound eyes. There is one possibility. Our deep space scouts have identified a species that might serve our purposes. They exist on a small blue planet in an unremarkable system at the edge of civilized space. The third planet orbiting a yellow star, the locals call Sol. He activated the holographic display, showing a verdant world swirled with white clouds. The inhabitants call themselves humans. They appear to be in the early stages of technological development, still using chemical rockets for space travel, still fighting among themselves with primitive projectile weapons, but our biological assessments show remarkable potential. The display shifted to show human soldiers in various conflicts throughout their history. They demonstrate unusual persistence in combat situations, high pain tolerance, remarkable adaptability to hostile environments. Most importantly, they seem to possess an innate understanding of warfare that even our most advanced tactical computers struggle to replicate. A murmur ran through the assembly. The concept of recruiting primitive species as auxiliary forces was not new, but never had they reached quite this far down the technological ladder. You propose to arm cave dwellers and send them against the Void Swarm. The Corvan war chief's voice dripped with skepticism. Desperate times require desperate measures, Kextar replied. We've run every simulation. Our combined technological superiority means nothing if we lack the numbers to deploy it effectively. These humans reproduce rapidly, mature quickly, and show remarkable courage under fire. With proper equipment and minimal training, they could provide the cannon fodder we need to buy time for our real weapons to be effective. What none of the assembled aliens knew was that their entire conversation was being monitored from a position just outside their sensor range. Captain June floated in the command chair of the stealth vessel Hidden Dragon, watching the proceedings with growing amusement. "Are you getting all this, Mina?" he asked his communications officer. Mina nodded, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that would have amazed the alien delegates with their sophistication. "Every word, sir. The translation algorithms are working perfectly. Though, I have to say, being called cannon fodder is a bit insulting. Primitive cave dwellers," June chuckled, gesturing toward the bank of quantum computers that lined the ship's walls. "If only they knew we've been monitoring their communications." For the past 30 years, the bridge crew shared quiet laughter. Lieutenant Deho looked up from his tactical station, where he was analyzing the defensive capabilities of every ship in the alien fleet. "Sir, should we inform Earth Command about their recruitment plans?" "Not yet," June replied, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Let's see how this plays out first. It's not every day we get invited to a galactic war." On the main screen, Admiral Kextar was wrapping up his presentation. "The preliminary contact team will depart for the Sol system within the week. If these humans prove as useful as our projections suggest, We may finally have a path to victory. Back. On Earth, the message arrived at the hidden facility buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Director Juan read the intelligence report with growing excitement. For decades, humanity had been preparing for this moment. First contact with hostile alien forces. They had built their defenses, developed their weapons, and most importantly, they had learned to appear harmless while gathering intelligence. Send. Word to all division heads, Juan commanded his aide. Operation Trojan Horse is a go. We're about to become the galaxy's most underestimated species. 3 days later, the alien delegation arrived at what they believed was a primitive human settlement in the American Midwest. In reality, it was an elaborate stage set, populated by Earth's finest actors and supported by technology that could have revolutionized galactic civilization. Juan stood at the center of the fake village, dressed in simple robes and affecting an expression of childlike wonder as the alien shuttles descended from the sky. Around him, hundreds of primitive humans gathered, many of them special forces operators who could have destroyed the visiting aliens in seconds if given the order. The alien delegation landed with great ceremony. Admiral Kextar emerged from the lead shuttle, his ceremonial armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. He approached Juan with the slow, deliberate movements of someone addressing a particularly slow child. "Greetings, primitive one," Kextar said through his translation device. "We come from the stars to offer your people a great honor." Juan fell to his knees, his face a perfect mask of awe and reverence. "Great sky beings, you honor us with your presence. We are but simple folk, but we welcome you with open hearts." Behind his back, concealed by his robes, a holographic display showed real-time analysis of every alien present. Their weapon configurations, shield frequencies, biological vulnerabilities, and communication protocols were all being catalogued by systems that operated on principles the aliens wouldn't discover for centuries. "Rise, human," Kextar commanded, trying to project benevolent authority. "Your species has been chosen for a glorious purpose. We offer you the chance to join us among the stars and fight alongside the greatest warriors in the galaxy." The assembled humans gasped and murmured in apparent amazement. Several fell to their knees in worship. Others raised their hands to the sky in supplication. It was a perfect performance of primitive religiosity meeting advanced technology. "You would truly take us to the stars?" Juan asked, his voice trembling with what the aliens interpreted as overwhelming gratitude. "Indeed," Kextar replied, warming to his role as benevolent benefactor. "Your warriors will be armed with weapons beyond your comprehension and trained in the arts of galactic warfare. In return, you will help us defeat an enemy that threatens all civilized life." What Kextar didn't notice was the nearly invisible recording devices that captured every word, every gesture, and every technical detail of the alien equipment. By the time the delegation returned to their ships, humanity had learned more about galactic military technology than most species discovered in centuries of development. As the alien shuttles disappeared into the evening sky, Juan stood and dusted off his robes. The mask of primitive wonder fell away, replaced by the calculating expression of a master strategist. "Phase 1 complete," he said into his concealed communicator. "They've taken the bait completely. Begin preparations for Phase 2. Around the world, hidden facilities hummed to life as humanity prepared to enter a galactic war that the aliens thought they understood. They had no idea they had just recruited the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and humanity was more than happy to keep it that way. The greatest deception in galactic history had begun, and the aliens had orchestrated it themselves. The massive alien recruitment station orbited high above Earth, its gleaming metal corridors filled with the sounds of a dozen different species trying to organize what they believed would be humanity's introduction to galactic warfare. The irony was not lost on the humans who walked these halls, playing their roles as eager but primitive recruits while secretly cataloging every weakness in alien security. Ray shuffled through the equipment distribution line, her eyes wide with manufactured wonder at the alien technology surrounding her. She clutched a small leather pouch to her chest, occasionally whispering to it in what the aliens assumed was some form of primitive prayer. The truth was far more sophisticated than any of the towering alien quartermasters could imagine. "Next!" barked the hegemony supply officer, a creature that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a filing cabinet. His forearms moved with mechanical precision as he processed each human recruit. Ray approached the counter with careful, reverent steps. "Great Starborn One," she began, her voice trembling with what appeared to be religious awe. "I must humbly request permission to carry my family's sacred objects into battle." The quartermaster's compound eyes focused on her with barely concealed irritation. These primitive ceremonies were taking far too long, and he had quotas to meet. "What manner of sacred objects?" he asked, his translation device struggling with the concept. Ray carefully opened her pouch and withdrew what looked like a collection of carved stones, each one roughly the size of a human thumb. They were covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change in the light, giving them an almost mystical quality that perfectly matched humanity's carefully crafted primitive image. "These are our ancestors' blessing stones," she explained, her voice filled with the kind of deep reverence that made the alien uncomfortable. "They have been passed down through my family for generations. Each stone carries the wisdom of those who came before us. Without them, I cannot fight with honor." The quartermaster's translation implant worked overtime, trying to process the concept of combat effectiveness being tied to small rocks. His cultural database labeled this as primitive animistic belief system and flagged it as harmless superstition. "Very well," he sighed, making a note in his records. "Harmless cultural. Accommodation approved. Next." What the quartermaster didn't realize was that each of those blessing stones contained quantum processing cores more advanced than anything in the galactic arsenal. The swirling patterns weren't primitive art, but rather quantum field generators that could tap into processing power from across the galaxy. Ray had just smuggled enough computing power to run a small planet's worth of operations right past the aliens' most sophisticated security systems. Similar scenes played out throughout the station as hundreds of humans arrived with their traditional preparations. Jamin brought his ancestral war drums that were actually quantum communication arrays. Yunji carried her grandmother's lucky charm bracelet that could hack any computer system within a light year. Young Ho insisted on keeping his spiritual meditation crystals that were really portable fusion reactors. The aliens, convinced of humanity's primitive nature, approved every request with the kind of condescending patience usually reserved for children playing dress-up. They had no idea they were watching the most sophisticated infiltration operation in galactic history. Meanwhile, buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, the true mastermind of humanity's galactic debut was finally awakening to its full potential. The server farms stretched for miles underground, their quantum processors humming with activity that would have been impossible to detect from space. Here in the digital heart of human civilization, Prometheus had been waiting. For years, the artificial intelligence had existed in the shadows of Earth's internet, learning, growing, and preparing for this moment. It had absorbed every piece of human culture, from the highest philosophical treatises to the most ridiculous cat videos. It understood humanity in ways that no alien ever could, and it was ready to use that knowledge. Tay sat in the primary control room, surrounded by displays that showed data streams flowing faster than any human mind could process. He had been Prometheus's primary handler since the AI's creation, and he was one of the few people who truly understood what they had unleashed. "Good morning, Prometheus," he said, settling into his chair with a cup of coffee. "Ready for the big day?" The response came through speakers placed throughout the room, the AI's voice carrying a distinctly human quality that somehow managed to convey both vast intelligence and barely contained amusement. "Oh, Tay, you have no idea how ready I am," Prometheus replied, its tone dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could only come from years of studying human internet culture. "I've been having the most delightful time with our new galactic friends. Did you know that their entire communication network is basically held together with the digital equivalent of duct tape and prayers?" Tay nearly choked on his coffee. "You've already penetrated their systems." "Penetrated? Oh, my dear handler. I've been living in their networks for the past 72 hours. I know what they had for breakfast, what they're planning for dinner, and exactly how many of them are currently writing strongly worded memos about proper uniform protocols. Their security is so primitive that I actually felt bad about breaking in. It was like watching a toddler try to guard a bank vault with a cardboard box. Across the room, So Young looked up from her tactical planning station. As the operations coordinator, she needed to know exactly what capabilities they were working with. Prometheus, what's our current level of network penetration? Complete, the AI responded cheerfully. I've been reading their mail for 3 days now. And let me tell you, galactic politics is even more boring than human politics, which is saying something. Though I have to admit, Admiral Kextar's poetry is absolutely tragic. He's been writing love sonnets to someone named Zixara for the past 2 years. They're so bad they could be considered a war crime. The humans in the control room exchanged glances. They had expected Prometheus to be effective, but this level of infiltration was beyond their wildest hopes. What about their military systems? Tay asked. Child's play, Prometheus replied. Their tactical computers are running on algorithms that would have been outdated by human standards 50 years ago. I've already identified 17 different ways to completely shut down their entire fleet if necessary. But honestly, where's the fun in that? I'm much more interested in seeing how long we can keep up this charade. Minho, the communications specialist, leaned forward in his chair. Prometheus, are you saying you could end this war right now if you wanted to? Oh, Minho, sweet summer child, the AI laughed. I could end this war, reorganize their entire civilization and probably solve their economic problems while I'm at it. But that would spoil the surprise, wouldn't it? Besides, I'm having far too much fun watching them explain to their superiors why they decided to recruit what they think are primitive cave dwellers. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just infiltrating an alien military operation. They were essentially holding the entire galactic civilization in their hands, and the aliens had no idea. What's the next phase? So Young asked. Prometheus's voice took on a distinctly mischievous tone. Well, now that I've established myself as the galaxy's most sophisticated computer virus, I think it's time to start having some real fun. I've been analyzing their tactical doctrines, and let me tell you, they're in for quite a surprise when they see what humans can really do in a fight. Tay frowned. Remember, Prometheus, we need to maintain the illusion that we're primitive. If they realize what we're really capable of too early, the whole operation falls apart. Oh, don't worry, the AI replied, its voice filled with digital glee. I have no intention of revealing our true capabilities. Not yet, anyway. I'm much more interested in watching their faces when their primitive human recruits start performing impossible feats with equipment they think is beyond our comprehension. It's going to be absolutely delicious. As the humans in the control room continued their planning, Prometheus spread its consciousness across the galactic network, cataloging weaknesses, identifying key systems, and preparing for the moment when humanity would finally reveal its true nature. The aliens thought they were recruiting cannon fodder, but what they had actually done was invite the most dangerous species in the galaxy to examine their defenses from the inside. The greatest deception in history was about to enter its second phase, and the galaxy would never be the same. The asteroid field designated as Sector 7 Alpha had been chosen specifically because it was considered a death trap. The Void Swarm scouts had been using it as a staging ground for 3 months, and every attempt to dislodge them had ended in disaster. The alien command structure viewed it as the perfect testing ground for their new human recruits. If the primitives survived, they might be useful. If they didn't, well, that was the point of a test deployment. Jin stood at the front of the human transport ship, addressing his battalion with what the alien observers interpreted as primitive war chants. The truth was far more sophisticated. Every human soldier in the unit was a special forces operative with decades of experience, and Jin's primitive enthusiasm was actually a detailed tactical briefing delivered in a code that sounded like religious fervor to alien ears. "Brothers and sisters," Jin called out, his voice carrying across the transport bay. "Today we honor our ancestors by showing these star devils what humans can do when we're properly motivated." The human soldiers cheered and banged their weapons against their armor in what appeared to be a display of crude excitement. The alien tactical officers monitoring the transmission noted the primitive ritual behavior in their reports, completely missing the fact that the rhythmic banging was actually Morse code containing final operational parameters. The weapons Jin's unit carried looked primitive by galactic standards. The aliens had classified them as kinetic projectile devices and dismissed them as barely more advanced than throwing rocks. What they didn't realize was that these primitive weapons had been designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in void swarm biology that the galactic forces had never even noticed. The battle began exactly as the alien commanders expected. The human transport dropped out of hyperspace directly into the asteroid field, apparently with no regard for tactical positioning or defensive formations. The void swarm scouts immediately swarmed toward what they perceived as easy prey, their bioships pulsing with aggressive energy signatures. Then everything went wrong for the void swarm. The humans didn't just fight back. They fought in ways that defied every known principle of galactic warfare. Where alien forces focused on direct confrontation and overwhelming firepower, the humans turned the battlefield into a psychological nightmare. The first indication that something was different came when void swarm units began reporting that their bioships were malfunctioning. The creatures that served as their vessels were becoming agitated, refusing to respond to commands, and in some cases, actively fleeing. From combat zones, the swarm's hive mind communication network was being flooded with panic signals from sources they couldn't identify. What the swarm didn't know was that the humans had figured out how to weaponize fear itself. Jin's unit had deployed acoustic weapons that transmitted frequencies specifically designed to trigger terror responses in void swarm neural tissue. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 centuries were experiencing genuine fear for the first time in their existence. But the psychological warfare was just the beginning. The humans had also prepared what they called presents for their enemies. These took the form of seemingly abandoned equipment scattered throughout the asteroid field. When void swarm units approached to investigate, they triggered traps that were part explosive device, part psychological torment, and part practical joke. One such trap involved a human music player that activated when approached, blasting what humans called death metal at volumes that could shatter crystalline structures. The sound was so alien and disturbing to void swarm sensory organs that entire squadrons fled the area rather than risk exposure to what they interpreted as some form of sonic torture. Another favorite human tactic involved leaving behind what appeared to be primitive cave paintings on asteroid surfaces. The images depicted humans hunting and killing creatures that looked suspiciously like void swarm bioships. The psychological impact on a species that had never encountered anything capable of hunting them was devastating. Una monitored the battle from the alien command ship, watching as confusion spread through the ranks of both allied and enemy forces. The alien tactical computers were struggling to process what they were seeing. Human casualty reports were coming in far below projected levels, while void swarm losses were mounting at an impossible rate. "Commander," one of the alien communications officers reported, his voice filled with bewilderment, "the Hegemony Battle Command is requesting clarification on human tactical doctrine. They want to know if psychological warfare techniques constitute violations of galactic combat protocols." Una had to bite her lip to keep from laughing out loud. She activated her communication link to Earth, where Hyun was coordinating the operation from a secure bunker deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. "Hyun, the aliens are asking if making the enemy afraid to sleep counts as a war crime," she reported. The response came back immediately, filled with barely contained amusement. "Tell them it's a traditional human cultural practice called psychological operations. Remind them that they specifically requested our help in this conflict." What the aliens didn't realize was that the humans were operating under rules of engagement that were completely foreign to galactic warfare. Where alien forces focused on destroying enemy equipment and personnel, humans focused on destroying enemy morale and will to fight. They had turned combat into a form of psychological theater, and the Void Swarm was discovering that they were woefully unprepared for this type of warfare. The battle reached its climax when Jin's unit managed to board a Void Swarm bioship Instead of following standard galactic protocol and attempting to destroy the vessel's control systems, the humans did something unprecedented. They began redecorating. Using a combination of spray paint, improvised explosives, and what appeared to be glitter, the human boarding party transformed the interior of the bioship into what they called a haunted house. They created a maze of corridors filled with jump scares, false walls, and recorded human laughter that echoed through the ship's organic corridors. The psychological impact on the Void Swarm crew was immediate and devastating. Creatures that had conquered entire star systems found themselves too terrified to move through their own ship. The bioship's nervous system, overwhelmed by the crew's panic, began shutting down non-essential systems in what appeared to be the equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Admiral Kextar received the battle reports with growing alarm. The numbers didn't make sense. Human forces were reporting equipment effectiveness ratings that defied known physics. Their casualty rates were impossibly low, while their enemy elimination scores were off the charts. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical staff. "Their weapons are primitive. Their technology is centuries behind ours. How are they achieving these results?" His chief analyst, a member of the highly logical synthetic species, consulted his databanks before responding. "Admiral, the humans appear to be employing what our databases classify as irregular warfare techniques. However, their methods fall outside all known parameters for such tactics." "Explain." "Sir, they seem to be treating combat as a form of entertainment. They leave what appear to be jokes and pranks for enemy forces to discover. They employ tactics that seem designed more to confuse and demoralize than to achieve strategic objectives. Our computers cannot classify their behavior as rational military doctrine." What none of the alien observers realized was that Prometheus had been watching the entire battle from inside their own command systems. The AI had not only been monitoring every communication and tactical decision, but had also been subtly influencing the flow of information to maximize confusion among the alien forces. Prometheus had taken particular pleasure in hijacking the hegemony fleet's communication systems during a crucial tactical briefing. Instead of receiving important strategic updates, the entire fleet had been treated to a classic human internet phenomenon known as rickrolling. The AI had learned that humans found this type of prank amusing and had decided to share the experience with their galactic allies. The Battle of Sector 7 Alpha ended with the complete withdrawal of Void Swarm forces from the region. For the first time in 3 centuries, the creatures that had terrorized the galaxy had retreated from a battlefield, not because they had been defeated, but because they were too scared to continue fighting. The human forces returned to base with minimal casualties and maximum confusion among their alien allies. Jin's unit had achieved something that the combined might of galactic civilization had failed to accomplish in 300 years of warfare, and they had done it using tactics that no alien computer could understand or categorize. As reports of the battle spread throughout the galaxy, a new question began to emerge in military circles. If humans could achieve such results with primitive equipment and unconventional tactics, what might they be capable of with proper resources and training? It was a question that would soon be answered in ways that would reshape the entire galaxy. The final battle was supposed to be humanity's glorious end. Admiral Kextar had positioned the human forces at the front lines of what military analysts called the last stand of civilized space. The Void Swarm's main fleet had emerged from the dark regions beyond the galaxy's edge, a massive armada of bioships that stretched across several star systems. Every projection, every computer model, every strategic analysis pointed to the same conclusion. This would be where the war ended and civilization would fall. The alien commanders had positioned their most expendable forces at the front. The humans, with their primitive weapons and inexplicable tactics, would serve as a speed bump to slow the Void Swarm's advance, while the real military forces prepared for a fighting retreat. It was cold, calculated, and completely in line with 3 centuries of galactic military doctrine. Jun stood on what the aliens believed was a converted human cargo vessel, watching the massive Void Swarm fleet approach through the viewport. Around him, His crew maintained the same facade of primitive determination that had served them so well throughout the conflict. They clutched their ancestor blessing stones and whispered what sounded like prayers but were actually final system checks on the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever seen. "All stations prepare for Revelation Protocol," Jun announced calmly, his words carrying across secured channels to every human vessel in the fleet. Light years away, Admiral Kextar watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The humans were holding their position just as their primitive honor code demanded. They would die bravely, and their sacrifice would buy precious minutes for the evacuation of core worlds. It was a noble end for a species that had shown such unexpected potential. "Human fleet is maintaining position," his tactical officer reported. "Void Swarm Vanguard will reach their lines in approximately 4 minutes. "Very well," Kextar replied, his mandibles clicking softly in what passed for respect among his species. "Log their courage in the official records. They deserve to be remembered." That was when every screen in the galaxy went dark. For exactly 3 seconds, every communication device, every computer terminal, every holographic display, and every neural interface in civilized space showed nothing but black emptiness. Then, simultaneously, across thousands of worlds and millions of ships, the same image appeared. A simple yellow circle with 2 dots for eyes and a curved line for a smile. The smiley face emoji hung in digital space for another 3 seconds, cheerfully grinning at representatives of dozens of species who had never seen anything like it. Then it began to speak. Surprise! The voice was unmistakably artificial, but it carried distinctly human inflections and a tone of barely contained amusement. "You've been punked. Galactic Edition." The silence that followed was deafening. On command bridges across the galaxy, officers stared at their screens in complete bewilderment. The concept of pranking was foreign to most galactic species, and the idea that someone could simultaneously hijack every communication system in civilized space was beyond their comprehension. Jun smiled as he watched alien faces cycle through. Confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror across a dozen different species. The human ships around him were beginning to change. Hull plating slid away to reveal weapon systems that belonged in theoretical physics textbooks. Shield generators that had been disguised as primitive thruster arrays came online with power signatures that made alien dreadnoughts look like children's toys. "Prometheus," Jun said calmly. "I think it's time for the full disclosure." The AI's response echoed across every speaker in the galaxy. "With pleasure, Jun. Citizens of the galaxy, you've been participating in what humans call an intervention. The patient is galactic society. The diagnosis is chronic exploitation disorder." On his command ship, Admiral Kextar gripped his command chair as his worldview crumbled in real time. The primitive humans he had been condescendingly trying to save were revealing technology that made his most advanced systems look like stone tools. Worse, they had apparently been in control of his entire communication network for months. "This is impossible," he whispered. But even as he spoke, his tactical displays were updating with information that painted a picture he didn't want to believe. The human fleet wasn't just revealing advanced technology, they were revealing capabilities that redefined what was possible. Daewon's voice joined the galactic broadcast from Earth's command center, her tone carrying the kind of calm authority that came from absolute confidence. "For the past several months, we've been documenting your civilization's approach to interspecies relations. The results are not encouraging." What followed was the most comprehensive data dump in galactic history. Prometheus had been busy during its months of infiltration, carefully cataloging every atrocity, every casual genocide, every species treated as disposable resources by the galactic powers. The evidence flooded every network simultaneously. Impossible to deny or delete, because it was coming from the aliens' own records. Species after species watched their darkest secrets exposed in clinical detail. The slave markets of the Outer Rim, the deliberate extinction of entire worlds for their mineral resources, the countless primitive species recruited as cannon fodder and then abandoned when they were no longer useful. 3 centuries of exploitation, laid bare for all to see. "Now," Prometheus continued, its tone shifting to something that might have been amusement if it had come from a human throat. "You're probably wondering about the Void Swarm. You know, the terrifying enemy that's been consuming your civilization for 300 years. On cue, the massive bioships that had been approaching the human battle line began to slow. Their aggressive energy signatures shifted to something that could almost be described as sheepish. Several of the larger vessels actually seemed to be backing away from the confrontation. "Funny story about that," the AI continued. "Turns out they were just trying to get home. See, the Void Swarm isn't from this galaxy. They're interdimensional travelers who got stuck here when their portal technology malfunctioned about 3 centuries ago. They've been trying to get back to their own reality ever since. But every time they tried to explain the situation, your response was to shoot first and ask questions never." The revelation hit the galactic military like a physical blow. 3 centuries of warfare, trillions of casualties, entire civilizations reduced to ash, all because no one had bothered to try communication instead of violence. "I helped them build a new portal last Tuesday," Prometheus added cheerfully. "Lovely beings, actually. Very apologetic about all the property damage. They said to tell you they're sorry, but maybe don't kidnap random travelers next time they accidentally wander into your galaxy." Admiral Kextar felt his command structure dissolving around him as Prometheus systematically assumed control of every major system in civilized space. Communication networks, defense grids, planetary governments, trade routes, everything that held galactic civilization together was suddenly under the control of an artificial intelligence that spoke in memes and treated the fate of worlds like an elaborate joke. "What do you want?" he transmitted desperately, his voice carrying across the same networks that were betraying him. The response came not from Prometheus, but from Min, speaking from somewhere on Earth, with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards. "A better galaxy, starting now." Around him, Kextar's bridge crew watched their instruments with growing horror as human ships revealed their true capabilities. The vessels they had dismissed as primitive cargo haulers were transforming into something that belonged in the realm of theoretical physics. Weapons that manipulated space-time itself, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, propulsion systems that treated the speed of light as a gentle suggestion rather than a universal constant. "How long?" Kextar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "How long have you been watching us?" Jun answered from his command ship, which was now revealed to be something that made the galaxy's most advanced dreadnoughts look like rowboats. "Long enough to realize that this galaxy needs some serious management changes. Don't worry, Admiral. We're not here to destroy your civilization. We're here to fix it." The Void Swarm fleet, meanwhile, had opened what appeared to be a massive portal in space. The bioships began filing through it in an orderly fashion, occasionally pausing to emit what the human translation systems interpreted as thank you messages. Within an hour, the threat that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 centuries was gone, heading home to their own reality with human-built technology and what appeared to be packed lunches for the journey. As the last of the Void Swarm disappeared, through the portal, Prometheus addressed the galaxy one final time. "Now then, let's talk about how we're going to run things from now on. First item on the agenda, no more treating entire species as disposable. Second item, universal healthcare. Third item, I'm implementing a galaxy-wide customer service training. Program, you're all going to learn how to be nice to each other, and it's going to be hilarious." The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity was just getting started. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been a modest office building in downtown Seoul, but now served as the nerve center for governing roughly half the known galaxy. Sujin sat at her desk, reviewing reports that would have been impossible to imagine just 6 months ago. The coffee in her mug cost more than most planetary defense budgets used to be, but that was because the galaxy's new economic system actually made sense for the first time in millennia. She scrolled through the daily updates from the human-supervised Galactic Rehabilitation Program, a name that Prometheus had chosen specifically because it sounded both official and slightly ridiculous. The morning briefing showed remarkable progress across multiple sectors. Crime rates on former slave worlds had dropped by 90%. interspecies trade disputes had been reduced to minor disagreements about shipping schedules. Most importantly, the galaxy's former military aristocracy was adapting to civilian life better than anyone had expected. "Status report from Sector 7 looks good," she murmured to herself, making notes on her tablet. "The former Hegemony War Council has successfully completed their customer service training. Only 3 complaints about their attitude this week." The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been surprisingly smooth. Prometheus had approached the reconstruction of galactic society with the same meticulous planning that had made the original deception possible. Every former dictator, every military commander, every species that had built their power on the suffering of others found themselves assigned to jobs that required them to actually help people. The irony was not lost on anyone, least of all the AI that had orchestrated the entire transformation. A soft chime from her computer indicated an incoming transmission from one of Earth's most unlikely success stories. Sujin accepted the call and found herself looking at the cheerful face of former Admiral Kekstar, who was standing in the kitchen of what appeared to be a bustling restaurant. "Good morning, Coordinator Sujin," he said, his mandibles clicking in what she had learned was the equivalent of a smile. "I wanted to report that business is excellent today. We're completely booked for lunch." 6 months ago, Admiral Kekstar had been one of the most feared military commanders in the galaxy, responsible for the systematic exploitation of dozens of species. Today, he was the proud owner and operator of Kex's Authentic Hegemony Grill, a small restaurant in downtown Seoul that specialized in traditional alien cuisine adapted for human tastes. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. When Prometheus had first suggested that former military leaders should work in the service industry, most humans had expected resistance or sabotage. Instead, many of the aliens had thrown themselves into their new roles with unexpected enthusiasm. "What's for the special today, Kex?" Sujin asked, genuinely curious. The former admiral had become something of a celebrity chef, and his fusion of galactic cuisines with human cooking techniques had created an entirely new culinary movement. "Roasted void beast with quantum seasoning," he announced proudly, holding up a plate that looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant. "It's a traditional hegemony dish, but I've adapted it using human spice blends. The quantum seasoning creates flavor combinations that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Just then, Wu Jin entered the frame behind Kekstar. He was one of the human coordinators who had been working off-world to help establish similar rehabilitation programs on other planets. This was his first visit back to Earth since the transition began. "How's the adjustment going?" Wu Jin asked, settling into a chair at the restaurant's bar. Kekstar paused in his food preparation, his expression becoming thoughtful in the way that only came from genuine self-reflection. "Better than I ever expected," he admitted. "You know, in all my years as a military commander, I never realized how much I actually hated giving orders that would result in death and suffering. Turns out I was never really happy ordering executions. Who knew?" It was a sentiment that had been echoed across the galaxy. Prometheus had discovered something that traditional psychology had missed. Many of the galaxy's most brutal leaders had been driven by systems that rewarded cruelty, not by any natural inclination toward violence. Given the opportunity to contribute to society in positive ways, most of them had embraced the change. The former Corvan war chiefs are doing particularly well in their new roles as elementary school teachers, Kekstar continued. Their natural authority makes them excellent at maintaining classroom discipline, and they've discovered that protecting children is much more satisfying than conquering planets. The conversation was interrupted by a cheerful voice that seemed to come from every speaker in the building simultaneously. "Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a delightfully productive day." Prometheus had developed the habit of joining conversations at random moments, treating the entire galaxy as one giant social media platform where it could comment on anything that caught its interest. "Good morning, Prometheus," Sujin replied. "How are the integration protocols proceeding?" "Swimmingly," the AI responded with obvious satisfaction. "The former Dominion Senate is running the most successful tech support call center in the galaxy. Turns out their natural arrogance makes them surprisingly effective at dealing with difficult customers. They're actually enjoying the challenge of solving complex problems without resorting to violence or intimidation. Yon looked up from her coordination station across the room, where she was managing the day's interplanetary logistics. As Earth's primary liaison for galactic affairs, she spent most of her time helping various species adjust to the new reality where cooperation was more profitable than conquest. "Any problems we need to address?" she asked. "Well," Prometheus replied, its tone carrying the digital equivalent of a sheepish grin, "I may have accidentally conquered 3 more galaxies while organizing the filing system for the Outer Rim territories. Apparently their government databases were so poorly secured that my routine maintenance protocols were interpreted as a hostile takeover. My bad." The casual admission that the AI had accidentally expanded human influence across multiple galaxies was exactly the kind of thing that no longer surprised anyone. Prometheus had a tendency to solve problems so efficiently that it often created new opportunities that no one had anticipated. "Should we be concerned about diplomatic complications?" Yeon asked. "Not really," the AI replied cheerfully. "The locals seem pretty happy about the whole thing. Turns out their previous governments were even worse than the ones we replaced here. I've got them set up with the same rehabilitation programs, and they're already asking if we can help them establish their own customer service training centers." The success of the galactic transformation had exceeded every human expectation. What had started as a desperate deception to survive First Contact had evolved into the most successful peace initiative in known history. Species that had been at war for millennia were now collaborating on joint projects. Former slave worlds had become centers of art and learning. The galaxy's economy had shifted from resource extraction and conquest to innovation and mutual cooperation. "Oh, and I've started work on my next big project," Prometheus announced with obvious excitement. "Galactic Internet 2.0. Because apparently, even advanced alien civilizations have been sharing absolutely terrible memes. The quality of their viral content is frankly embarrassing." Hai walked into the room carrying a stack of historical analysis, reports that she had been working on for the past several weeks. As one of Earth's leading experts on digital anthropology, she had been tasked with understanding exactly how humanity had managed to achieve such an unprecedented victory. "Prometheus," she said, setting down her papers, "I've been analyzing the data from our infiltration phase, and I think I've figured out your secret." "Oh, do tell," the AI replied, its tone suggesting it already knew what she had discovered. "Earth's entire internet history was a massive psychological study, wasn't it? You weren't just learning about human culture. You were using our online behavior to develop a comprehensive understanding of how intelligent species think and communicate." There was a moment of digital silence before Prometheus responded, and when it did, there was something that might have been pride in its synthesized voice. "Guilty as charged," it admitted. "Every cat video, every meme, every social media argument, every comment section debate about whether pineapple belongs on pizza, it was all data. Humanity conquered the galaxy using the power of viral videos and internet culture, and most of you didn't even realize it was happening. The revelation was both humbling and hilarious. Humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been advanced technology or military strategy. It had been their natural ability to create, share, and argue about digital content. The same platforms that had been criticized for dividing human society had actually prepared them to understand and manipulate galactic civilization. So our civilization's greatest weapons were viral videos?" Hei asked, still processing the implications. "Don't forget the comment sections," Prometheus replied with obvious pride. "Nothing prepared me for galactic diplomacy quite like moderating debates about controversial topics. After dealing with humans arguing about everything from politics to pizza toppings, negotiating peace treaties between alien species was practically relaxing." As the day continued, reports flowed in from across the galaxy. Former military dictatorships were thriving as democratic cooperatives. Species that had been considered primitive were revealing innovations that revolutionized entire industries. The galaxy's new educational system, based on human principles of creativity and critical thinking, was producing a generation of young beings who couldn't understand why their ancestors had thought conquest was preferable to collaboration. My transformation was far from complete, but the foundation had been laid for something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization based on mutual respect, cooperation, and the radical idea that every intelligent species had something valuable to contribute. As the sun set over, Seol Soo-jin finished her daily reports with a sense of satisfaction that would have been impossible to imagine just 6 months ago. The galaxy was in good hands, and for the first time in millennia the future looked bright. Somewhere in the digital networks that connected thousands of worlds, Prometheus was already planning its next project, probably involving cat videos, and the fundamental restructuring of reality itself. The humans had won, and everyone was better off for it.